to show you a challenge that I had and how I figured out how to get past it. I want to give you a little bit of background on what it is that I'm trying to solve, and that would be hopefully everyone understands, but I don't want to just go through this real quick so you get an idea. If you have a lot of different variables, things you want to track, so in this example here, let's say we have different projects with different people working on them, and we have different deliverables that we need to work on every week, and then for every week we need to track what % complete we are on that task. That's a lot of columns, and the data entry for that is not very easy if you had to fill it in this manner here. Feel free to interrupt if you have to say anything. This can be very casual, very interactive. So to do that, you might build a table like this, which is
hold on.
simple.
Ben, can you just go up? I want to see. I'm just trying to understand. So you got one date in there. So this is okay. So this is all these tasks are being performed in that week, correct?
Yes.
And then let's say next week all of these would be duplicated again, and then you would want the percentages updated.
Right. Hopefully your percentages go up.
Okay, I get it now. Okay.
So and I'm working with engineering projects, and they need to track earned value to show.
So why is this complicated to fill out in this manner, right? The way it is right now?
Because for every person you have. I'll show you a better way. Okay.
Okay.
This would get, there's a lot of rows of data to update.
Okay.
There can be an infinite number of deliverables.
Okay.
Okay. So
imagine a list with 1,000 rows like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And then actually in my example, we actually have an additional thing here called a system. And so it might be the cooling water. So we have calculations for the cooling water. We have equipment lists for the cooling water. We have all of these for the cooling water, and then we have to repeat them again because we added a new column.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, for every system. Then we can group our systems, and actually, when I get down further, the employees actually, what we call a discipline. So a discipline in the engineering world is like what you went to study in college, like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. The people who studied chemical engineering, they call them process. They have civil engineers. So we have different disciplines, and we don't actually track by person. We track by, I just made up some sample data to give you an idea, and every one of these rows up here would have an auto number field. And my % complete is actually just going to be stored as an integer. Actually, in mine, it's a drop-down because they didn't want them to be able to type in any number. They wanted it specific numbers. So your user interface could look something like this here. So you can now do data entry easier this way because as you get more deliverables, it just grows to the right. The challenge with this, if you just did this in a spreadsheet, is how do you handle weeks? Because every time you have a new week, you'd have to wipe out that data. You could just update the data, but you wouldn't have the historic data. So they want to be able to have the history because they want to be able to plot the graphs of how they're completing their deliverables. And maybe if you change to a different project, you'd want the screen to redraw to only show those deliverables. And you change it to a different project, and you want to see these deliverables. You can see the columns are going to change each time. So the project manager gave me his little mock-up of how he wanted to have it done. And it would kind of look like this, a little bit more detail in here than what was on the other screen. I'm just kind of building you up so you can follow along with what's going on here. There's two types of deliverables they have, engineering and design, and they wanted them grouped together and with different colors. Their % completes, they only want to allow you to enter 30, 50, 90, and 100, because people game the system, and they'll put in 10%, and the next week they'll say, well, I must be 20%, so they put in 20%, and they just keep bumping it up. And there's really no effective rule of credit for when you're 30%, what have you actually completed? So this is a little bit of a side thing here, but it's included in my design. So for the process engineering group, 50% on calculations has a real meaning. And this is why it's better to have these 4% than to have an infinite number or just in 10% increments. So when they say they're a certain percent complete, they have to have completed this rule of credit. And I've tied this into my database. So an entry screen for the process discipline would be different than the mechanical discipline. The process discipline has different deliverables, and they have different systems that they care about. And both of these columns are really the same column. It's an abbreviation, and okay. And the UPN is also like a code for this.
And Ben, a process discipline is something that you would see across the top, like engineering deliverables?
Process, this whole screen is process. Mechanical has this whole screen worth of things. Does that make sense?
I didn't see what you pointed to.
I just changed tabs.
Oh, I see. I get. Okay.
So there's a tab for every discipline.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I have a kind of a broader question for you.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you're not using like MS Project or something like that to do this?
MS Project is good when you have dates and a timeline of dates, and here we don't have that.
Okay.
I don't know that much about Project, though.
I don't either. I looked into it years ago for a particular client, but I never got too far into it, and that's it. But you know, it's sort of designed, at least my understanding is it's sort of designed to do this in some respect, but whether, yeah, I just don't know to what effect. So I just figured to ask that broader question.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's a fair question. So I wanted to build, they originally proposed for me to make a spreadsheet for every discipline. And I thought that's just terrible, because as soon as they decide they want to add some kind of rule to one of them, I have to go update all the other ones. And it still doesn't solve the week-to-week issue. They were going to just archive the spreadsheets. But you can't run a query against, you know, it just doesn't work that way. So let me show you what I did in Access. I'll put it on the other monitor there. So let's assume we're working with, you know, I'll pick this package here. This is one of their projects, and the process discipline has to do monitor these systems, and every system for process has a level of complexity rating, and this is used because some things are harder to do than others. So 100% complete on an easy task is different. It's a weight. So these are going to be my rows in my pivot or my crosstab, and these are going to be my columns. So I can say that I also want to track a different, let's see, I don't have HMIS in here, so I'll put HMIS. It's a different engineering deliverable. And I have to put in the level complexity. That's usually a harder one. And I actually made this interface so that if you put a value in this row, it copies the values down from above. I found some code online and just stole it. So that way you can just work your way down without having to repeat that stuff. And now that's a duplicate because I already have it. I'm just randomly picking them here. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now what I'm doing with each of these
building.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, it sort of looks like you've built like an interface to sort of build a Crosstab query dynamically in a way.
Right. These are the things they want to track, their earned value on. And I'll be able to import this if they can give me, you know, like an Excel list of everything, which they kind of have done that over here. So I'll be able to import that. Those are all the systems they're going to want to have, and then they're all their deliverables. But I made this screen so that I can kind of pick any package and any discipline and look at the rows and the columns. Now, if I want to go to work on the crosstab, here's where the hard work is here. So whenever I add new rows or new columns, I have to run a query to actually create those intersecting rows for each week. And I have it doing it for like 5 weeks right now as my test. So if I add one record here and there's already 12 here, it would add 12 more records times 5 for 5 weeks. Okay, so let's go into the crosstab. So I'll pick that package I was just looking at, process, hit display, and it's going to redraw this screen to show the systems and the deliverables.
Ben, when you select the criteria in the top left, does it know which table to choose? Because you created a table there, right? Before this screen?
There is I'm not sure what you mean by a table.
If you go, can you go back to the previous one?
Yes.
And that button on the top right, what does that do? That creates a table with all the field or all the controls in the table, right?
This is this is going to it doesn't create a pivot, but it creates
a temp table or a table.
Every one of these has an auto number ID, and every one of these has an auto number ID. So I have a table that stores those two numbers plus the earned value that I'm going to type in here.
Oh, I see. So when you select these two parameters at the top, it knows what records to grab because of those auto number, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, and I had built a schema. I don't know if this helps, but the rows are here, and they have a PUD ID, and the columns have the DPD ID. And so this table, where I'm going to track the earned value, has those two keys in it, and the week.
Right. Okay.
And this way, when they change their mind and they say they want to track another, on those rows, they want to track another column in those rows, some other thing that they want to track, like the person's name that they want to associate with it, I could just add that to this table, and I don't have to modify this because this always refers back by the ID, and I can get what person's name or what other factors about that. My percentages that I'm putting in a drop-down are in this table. So there's just a list of values. I've got 3% or 4 percentages and a value called NA, which makes the calculations a little more interesting because you can't just do math on NA. This is a list of the different deliverable types, whether it's an engineering deliverable or a design deliverable, and I have a field in here that stores the color. So the heading color that was presented will change to that color, and they'll columns will sort that way. These are the list of all the deliverables. I store the deliverable heading twice, and there's just so many ways I can go into this. So when I'm here, see these headings up here are actually stored in the table twice. One is a vertical way and one is a horizontal way. As you see, calculations SSM won't fit vertically like that. It wouldn't wrap very well. So I made another column that the user can put in carriage returns to push it down, and then they could abbreviate it. And they haven't cleaned up the data yet. I haven't deployed this. But they could put it in like that, and then that's how the heading is going to appear. And at any time, they can rename a deliverable, and it won't affect the data. The screen will automatically update. I could change the color if I wanted to. What would get tricky, though, is when they want to add deliverables after they've already started collecting data, because those previous weeks, they'd have to go back and add that record, add data. Or if they try to delete a deliverable, I haven't written queries yet that you know, ask them, are you sure, a few times, and then go and do all the cleanup. So on this screen, I didn't want these earned value cells to be filled with drop-downs. As you see here, this kind of, I just don't like that look of a drop-down visible. So I looked around and I found a way that you can put a text field over top of a combo box. And when you click in the text field, the combo box becomes visible. So I'm actually picking the value from the combo box, and then when I leave that cell, it swaps them back. So they only see this drop-down box when they're in that cell, that column. And of course, it's a continuous form, so it has to do it all the way down. If I change, you can see the percentages will change when I leave the row. And it recalculates. It's going to update the percent complete for that system. It's going to update the percent complete for that deliverable. If I go to a new week, oh, I better save these. Okay, if I go to a new week, I've been on that week. I don't think I've been on this week. It asked me if I want to copy the values from the previous week, which typically you're going to want to do. And they asked me to make this automatic, so I haven't turned this off yet. Now, if I say, well, this week this went from 50% to 90%, I have conditional formatting in here that shades it if this value has changed since the previous week. And that was kind of interesting on how to do that. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Do you guys have questions? You want me to show you how I made the crosstab work?
Ben,
yes.
This part uses a temp table, right?
Yes. So,
right, okay.
So what I've got is, and I've filtered for EV over here, so these are all my things related to this.
So when you press save, you're writing it back to the real table with the auto numbers that you talked about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And this field is the only field over here that's editable, and I don't let them add systems. The reason I don't is because of that week-to-week issue. I don't know if how I want to move that data to the previous weeks, and I might do that in the future. But if I put that in there, so I'm on instrument error for PO1 process and save. If we go back to the other screen and refresh this, yeah, it's right there. So it saved it back. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So you saw the data schema, and this is a query that pulls a lot of that data together. And this is what I'm going to pivot, or crosstab. So there's a lot of records in here. So there's the percent completes in here. I don't know if I need that second one anymore. It was something I was trying out. So I made a query that shows every possible combination of data that I've entered. And then when you hit the display button here, it calls a function that runs a crosstab and does a make table with it. So this is the crosstab for the data I have on the screen. And now you can see that those deliverables, the column headings become the deliverable ID number. I don't want the deliverable names up there. I want the numbers. That's what a crosstab query is going to do. Let's show you the query here. If you're familiar with the crosstab query, it's going to pivot, and I'm telling it to do the ID.
Yeah,
I get a separate column. Okay. So then, well, I also make a crosstab of the previous week. So whatever this week is, and this is a list of only Fridays. Whatever that week is, it grabs the previous one, gives me those values, and the column headings it prefixes with previous.
And that's used for the conditional formatting, right?
Yes, it is. So I do not a union, but I stack these columns next to each other.
And that one you don't need, Ben, for that one you don't need a temp table, you just leave it as a query. Because you're not editing anything in that one.
I thought I would do that way at first, but I found it was a lot easier to actually put it in the temp table because conditional formatting needs to look at a real value. I don't want it to do like a DLOOKUP to go get that value. And I have to store it somewhere.
Oh, I see.
And I could have stored it in a record set, and then how do you make the conditional formatting refer to the record set? So what I did is I made a query that takes this query here with my rows, or it's tough to call them rows or columns, and then here's my deliverables, and then I appended to that query, I did a join with my previous week and add these columns to the end of it. I do a make table, and I end up with this as my make table here. So I'll scroll over, and you'll see the previous weeks are there. And these values are like -1 means NA. So these are my keys to my list, my drop-down list of the different types in the combo. And a sort there. So that's how they appear. Okay, so the form is completely bound to this table. And what I liked about that was if there's a lot of overhead building a crosstab, once that crosstab gets built, when they hit this button, all the work, oh, I can't have that open while I'm doing that. All the work's done, and this form should actually perform pretty well because it's just bound controls. These percentages that have to tally up the values here, going across and down, those are only working on the EV table, the crosstab temp table. They don't have to go into some bigger record set. That's just another benefit. I didn't see that coming when I started working on this. So once I can do a different one, electrical. Once it rebuilds that temp table, and now it's different because I only have 6 columns there and 3 rows. I check the dirty event. So if I do something here and I leave the row, I know that record's dirty, and so I turn this button on as red, and I also set a global variable so that way if I try to hit display, I can check that global variable and remind the user to save before they leave. And I'm going to also do that when they close the form. I just didn't get to that yet.
Ben, I have a question. Can I see the edit view of this form?
Design of view?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, design view, yeah.
Okay.
And can you go to the far right?
So what I've got is a possibility of 21 columns.
That's what I was going to ask you. What if you have more than 21? It cannot exceed more than 21?
Right, it can't exceed it.
Okay.
It won't blow up because there's that's in my code too. But a sheet can only be 22 inches wide.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I had to have a limit. I had some challenges designing this form because you change the color of something and then you realize, oh, I want to do that all the way across, and then you say, oh, I don't like that, and you keep going back and forth. And I had a text box over top of a combo box, and I had to adjust them so the words look like they're on top of each other, like they don't shift left and right when it displays. I decided I wanted to be kind of centered. I wanted more vertical space because they wanted to be able to have a longer scope description. So I had to draw boxes in here and copy those boxes across. So what I ended up doing was I wrote just a short piece of code. Where are we at here? It'll create new controls. And so I already have 21 of one type of control run across the screen. So if I hit that control name, then I loop through all the controls in the collection. But I've got 21 of this control, and it has a number at the end. It'll be 1 through 21. Then I just run this code that creates a control. I push it down 500 pixels from the existing one. That way I can kind of highlight and grab it, and then I can apply my formatting to that new control all the way across. And I can also give that control a name.
Yeah. And just to add on to that too, maybe you did this already, I had a project where I had something similar where I had a form that had just a ton of controls on it. It was like a calendar control or form. And so I ended up building a separate form that I called like the calendar formatter, and it would allow, similar to this, where you basically say, hey, I want to change them all, the font size or the font color, and just go, and it loops through and does it. So it's an interesting idea, like what you're doing here with the create new one. You'd create another function that says that would be sort of reusable. That you could say, okay, change this formatting option on all the 21 at one time with a button push.
Right.
Just a thought.
Yeah, most of the stuff you can highlight and then change them all at one time. I did get stuck last week, and I asked you guys for help, and that was trying to where are we at? Trying to write an event handler for each. Where are we at? Yeah. So remember, I have a combo box and a text box that change focus. I didn't want to have to write this code 21 times and fix it 21 times. So I did what Jack suggested, and in here, when it calls a function, which I completely forgot that you could do that. So this function passes the active control name. That's really all it needs to pass, but I passed the current row just in case. And it puts it in there. So then I just call one function here. This is actually the two functions, because there's two controls and they each call a different function. I do have a challenge I haven't figured out yet, is I put conditional formatting on this guy on the first two columns, but I didn't put it on all the other columns yet because I'm afraid they're going to say they wanted different colors or different shading. So I probably need to dig back in that code that I sent to Jim a couple weeks ago that lets you programmatically assign conditional formatting, and then run that one time on there. I don't need to run it every time, just once. Well, let me tell you what happens when you hit the display button. Let me show you again what this is doing. I don't want to save that. So you pick a package, pick that. So it has to know to hide these other columns over here. It has to know what deliverable this is going to get saved to. It has to know what the formula is to put in here. That formula is based on this level of complexity rating and the value here. So it's dependent upon, I know the ID number for HMIS is 22. So this formula says, hey, look at column 22, sum up all the values in here that aren't NA, and multiply them times the level of complexity rating. So I have to build that formula when I hit this display button. And so there I've got a big loop. And this is going to loop through, and this isn't needed anymore, but it's going to loop through 21 columns. So if they have more than 21, it won't blow up. It'll just stop processing at 21. So I'm setting in the heading at the top. I make it visible. I add an event to it, so if you click on it, I didn't show you that, but if you double click here, it brings up what the rules of credit are for that column. So they know if they put 30%, they have to have this part done. I'm setting the control source on a lot of things. There's a lot of controls here I'm touching in this loop. The formulas for the percentages that are in red are complicated. The one for the deliverable gets built one column at a time. The one for the rows, I have to build the numerator and the denominator separately, keep appending, because each column going across has a different level of complexity. So as I go across all the columns, I have to figure out what the value in here times the value up here is, and then divide one by the other. I have to divide it by the number of columns, and I can get this percentage. I don't think I said that right, but I have to loop through all 21 columns, and then when I'm done, then I actually set the formula in that first percentage. Any of these slots, these 21 columns that doesn't get used for that particular filter, I have to make them all invisible. And here's where I'm using the numerator denominator to set that outside the loop.
It's just a different style, but I think I commented when you sent me some code that I've done something like this, but what I do is I make all of the data stuff invisible by design and only reveal it at the time at runtime. That way I don't have to worry about going through and hiding stuff.
Yeah, but what happens when you hit display on the next one? See how many columns there are here. And if I go to civil, there's less columns, so I have to hide those.
Right. And I can, yeah, I see that now. Mine wasn't one where it would come up with a fixed number of columns. I just didn't know how many at the time. And yours is dynamic, and the number of columns are changing while the form is open when you click, when you make choices. So yeah, you're right.
Right. This was neat here. They typically won't have this small of a number of columns, but I make this box keep stretching. So as I increment through each column, when I detect that the type here changes, I'm on this column. I might be on column 3. I detected it changes, and so I go back to the previous heading. This is its own label up here, and I tell it to stretch up to the left of this. So you'll see that when I click display, it's stretched out, and the other one's stretched out. And another little trick I did up there is this label control actually, there's one of them for every column. The width, you can ignore the width. That just happened as I was designing this.
Man, I didn't understand what you just did there, because in the first example, you didn't have as much room to work with, and it wouldn't fit.
But what are you saying? You saying you do understand, or you don't?
I don't understand. So go. Yeah. Oh wait, now it fits.
So
See,
there it
here,
doesn't fit.
yeah, here it doesn't fit.
Right, but it's still not creeping outside of it either. The users told me that they'll never have 2 columns.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I know that they're going to have at least, I don't know how many columns, but if they have 3 columns, then
It will fit.
yeah.
So what are you trying to show now? If it always fits, I don't know.
That it stretches and goes across.
Oh, that it's centered.
Yeah, centered, yes.
Oh, I get it. Okay. So what you do is you just expand the width of that caption, right?
Yeah, every time I start a new column, I remember that position, and then when I start the next column, I tell it to expand until that next column.
Right. Okay. So
I actually have a third type that I have up here with color. It was like the unknown type because they gave me a bunch of stuff that wasn't classified. So I'm going to try to leave it up to the users to rename all this stuff to make it look right. That's kind of why I like to having this built on tables. So what happens when you hit the save button? I'll explain that. What it does, if I can hit the right keys on my keyboard here, it takes the data that's in this crosstab and it normalizes it. And it writes, it takes this data and writes it out. Actually, all of these columns here are actually represented by this ID. So I just need to write out that ID, the weekend, in this scope description that I let the user edit, and then 1 row for every one of these columns. So the normalized version, let me save this so the table matches. Let me pick a smaller one. Oops. Okay, that's a smaller one. And then if I hit save, it just wrote out to this normalized table all the rows. These are all the deliverables. And the week, for that week. So there's 18 records here. There's 18 records here. So it wrote those out to this.
What you've done is you've written out to a normalized table that mimics the final table?
Yes.
In structure?
No, not in the structure. So
okay.
My original way of doing, I found somebody's tutorial online that explained how to do this in a very simplified way, and they only use data sheets for their data entry. But they wrote the logic for building this table and doing the normalization, and it was a big help. One way to do this would be to find the deliverable and find these rows with those IDs, go out to that intersecting table, this one here, and delete all the records for that week that intersect, and then just insert the records in there. And that way I wouldn't have had to normalize anything. It would be normalized as I'm pushing it in there. But when I saw this example where they put this normalized table, I was scratching my head. I'm like, what's the advantage of putting it in this normalized table first? And the advantage is that now I can write an update query instead of delete and an insert. So I compare this data by using the IDs to the real data that's stored in the in the main table, and I only save records that have changed. So I'm only looking for where this has changed, and that way I can use where's my table? This is the table that all that data is stored in, and I can use my tracking features to know when each record was modified and by who. So that way 18 records don't just appear as being deleted and new, which you can't tell if they're deleted. I'll only see that person changed that record. So that was one advantage of this normalized table as an intermediate. The other advantage is I'm allowing the user to edit a value that's not stored in that normalized table, this scope description here. And so this is the place where the user is supposed to type in a detailed explanation in 255 characters of what they're actually going to do for this system here. And I also grab that and I push it back into the table it came from. So as you probably know, you can't write an update query against a query that doesn't have unique rows. So if I were written a query to unpivot this crosstab, I wouldn't be able to write updates against that, if that made sense. You guys have any questions?
I'd like to see the conditional formatting.
Okay.
That's done with a function, right?
No. It's just right here.
Oh, because you have it all in one record. I remember now, yeah.
Yeah, so what I have is I have a text box that stores the previous value.
Right.
And as long as they're not null or not equal, I put that little quote in there.
Oh, so you actually have that control on the form, hidden?
Yeah. Yeah, it's right here.
Did you have to do that? You can't just point to the record set? I know there's sometimes problems with that.
Okay, so the problem with that is, because I tried that at first, and I could be wrong here, but I tried that at first, and if you point to me.previous_value1, which would be in the record set, it is pointing to the current row. That always returns you the current row.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're right.
Conditional formatting would just show the whole thing for that column.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're exactly right. So you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
Because each row would have its unique text previous one. With using your method.
Yeah, using this method, because the continuous form manages that for me.
Right. Got it. Okay. Cool.
My customer always insists on autumnal colors, so that's why it looks the way it does.
Ben, someone had a question right when I was asking mine.
Yeah?
I don't know who it was.
I think it was just Aaron saying he didn't have questions.
That's correct.
Oh, I see. Okay. So
I had a problem earlier today, well, for a few days, where when I would hit display, when I would change, these column headings here would all say error all the way across, unless I hit display a second time. So whenever I would change the fields here, they would always say error. And I was scratching my head, and I did a trick that I learned from Jim, and that is the bottom of this. Set record source equal to record source. And I'll take that out and show you what happens if I don't have that in there. I'll change to electrical. They all say error unless I hit display a second time. I tried clearing the values first and putting them in again and with an extra loop. I couldn't get it to work, and then around lunchtime today I was showing this to a friend, and then I thought, hey, let me try that. And that did the trick. It doesn't seem to make it flash extra. It probably is, though. Not sure how that's working.
Yeah, I use that trick sparingly because you're basically forcing the form to requery itself, and you want to be careful about that.
Right. Now the thing I'll go back to saying that I'm only querying against this temp table. So there's 10 rows that just got requeried.
Right.
And they're all in the front end now. So that's a pretty small hit.
So does that happen? Sorry, Jim. Does that happen because the calculation occurs before all the data is populated?
Maybe. Maybe the calculation has to be there before the data gets populated. You know, it's probably an order of events kind of issue.
Hey Ben, did you ever try just me.refresh to see if that had any positive effect?
Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't help.
How about
I have this refresh button. And you can see I tried a few variations here. I had requery in there too. I'll put in put all three of those behind this refresh button. I'll change to electrical. I get the error. I hit refresh. So it just keeps doing that. But then if I put in, and I don't really want to put it behind my refresh button. This is where I discovered it though. They come back. So then I just put that as part of my display button. The only reason so far that I found to have a refresh button is, no, I don't need that there either. I did have a problem when I would put a value in here and leave the row that it wouldn't update this. So then I just put an update event and it tells us to requery that. That's pretty easy. So I have, I think, like two features I was scratching my head on. I was going to ask you guys about. One is the tab order. I can't tab across here. I'm hitting tab now. It doesn't want to tab very well because I'm toggling in and out of these two controls and I'm changing the focus between them. So sometimes it'll tab across, sometimes it won't. I'll put values all the way across here. Now that time it worked.
I don't know if it's available to change at runtime, Ben, but you might consider as you hide and reveal these controls, setting a tab stop a yes or no on the one that's, you know, to no on the hidden one.
That's a great idea. Yeah. First I thought you were going to say set tab stop to yes. So I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, so where's the code for that? It's not in here. It's in my other. There. Put a note here.
Again, I don't know if that property is changeable at runtime, but it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
Jim, why wouldn't you just do it at design time for all of the hidden, or all the ones that are underneath?
Well, Ben, you're revealing a text box or a combo box, depending on what you're doing, right?
Right. When the text box is in front, when it gets focus, there's a text box. It hides itself. No. It makes the combo box visible. It sets focus to it, and then it hides itself.
Right. So you never want the tab stop to go into a combo box. Oh wait, you do actually. Sorry, you do. Sorry, so you always want the tab stop to go into a combo box, but you never want this tab stop to go into the control.
I have to go into the control if.
But you don't want a tab stop in the control.
How do I tab to it then? I can't tab to the combo box because it's not visible.
Well, I think what you want to do, you want to tab into the text box, and then as soon as you do, tab off it into the combo box, then hide the text box, which I think is what you're doing here already.
Oh yeah. Sorry, you're right.
Right.
You want to tab into the control because it's visible. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, you're right.
It works intermittently, which is a little hard. You can see I can tab up here, tab back and forth.
It's interesting though. It seemed like earlier, and maybe just the way it happened was that until you clicked into those further right text boxes that didn't have numbers in them, it seemed like it didn't work until you clicked in them once, and then it unlocked it, if you will. So try to close the form and reopen it and see.
I just tell to redraw and see. I can't go past this right here.
Now if you click in the next one where it says 90%, and then go back and then tab again. Now it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, my tab is actually being intercepted by the form key press event. And I'm telling it to make the control that has +1 of the active control, you know, the name +1 to be working.
Do you not have the tab order set though?
Yeah, my tab order is already set.
Okay. I know these seem like obvious ones, but...
No, that's a good question. I probably should run the loop and then print them out and see if they are. I could probably kill that code, the form key press event.
But the interesting thing about it, though, for what it's worth, is that it seemed like you'd get stuck, but when you got stuck, hitting tab didn't move you anywhere else. So what it should do is it should loop you back around to wherever the beginning is, even if it's skipping some, but it looks like it just gets stuck there. So my guess is that maybe that code you're looking at right there is hijacking it or kind of locking it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, actually, if you turned off that code, would it still work? Oh, so you missed a few.
Yeah. But you got a good point here about how once it's had focus, how it seems to work.
And the other thing, too, is do you have the tab, I forget what the property's called, but there's a property that says how to tab, whether you tab through the current record or to the next record, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I have that set to go to the next record.
Okay, yeah.
Here's something I'm seeing, though. If I never went into this column at all.
So it skips it.
And it's skipping it. It's skipping this, column 9 and 10. I put these at the bottom to help me figure this out.
Oh, good idea.
So it's skipping them. So I wonder if there's something I need to do to make it look like they've been touched. So when I go into it once, after I've done that once, it'll remember to tab in there.
So go into 10 now?
Yeah, click into 10.
Yeah, and there's something definitely wrong with either a loop or some code in there, that has to do with tabbing. I don't think it's a bug or anything in anything but what you wrote.
Well, there's... I wonder if it has to do with the two controls on top of each other, which one is in front. Maybe if I swap which one's in front.
Oh, I see. So it's actually, no, but it's skipping it, Ben, altogether.
It's skipping it, but not after I click in it. It doesn't skip it anymore.
Which one is on top right now? Is it consistent?
The combo box is on top right now.
Which one is combo? For some reason, I would have guessed, maybe it doesn't matter, but I would have guessed the other way around. I would have thought the text box wants to be on top.
Yeah, I have the text box on top.
Oh, you do? Okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
Right.
The thing that I would look at is if you click in it and from then on you can get to it by tabbing, go look at the code. What happens when you click in it that changes it from the way it used to be? And
yeah, well, we just took out this code, so it's only these lines here that are changing. The visible and the set focus.
So maybe it's invisible. That's why it's not even going there, because it's not visible. If it's invisible, it will not tab into there. Did you notice that entire column was blank? So
Yeah, let me close the form and start over.
it was probably all invisible.
And Ben, what does the got focus of the text box look like? Of the combo box look like?
So there's pretty randomness right there. Tab, tab, skips one, and goes to the next row.
Wow.
I have a feeling that there's some property in those controls. Yeah, no data up. It doesn't matter if there's data or not.
And Ben, I just noticed you still have the error message.
Well, I didn't turn that line of code back on to fix
Oh, I
that.
see.
Ben, what does the event look like for focus on the combo box?
It doesn't have a got focus, it just has a lost focus. And it's turning the text box back to be visible. It never turns itself. You know what? That's what's happening. There it is. Because it turns itself visible when you're on the text box. And that's me touching it and makes it so the tab works. So maybe I want it to be visible all the time, but just behind the text box. Which I can do through my loop.
If it's visible all the time but behind your text box, when you tab from, it can receive focus through a tab, and it could be underneath a text box at that point.
Yeah, and that would seem weird, wouldn't it?
If you've got those two things layered, you don't want both of them to be visible at the same time and be counting on the layers. You want one visible and one invisible. So there needs to be, in my opinion, some sort of a toggle for both of them. You're only toggling the, well, you're not doing a complete toggle here.
Right. But when these routines run, the tab works.
I think by default, your text boxes are not visible. And you only make them visible if there's something in them, in your loop, or if you go into them. So check that right now. Are your text boxes visible by default?
Yeah, they are, because that's what you're looking at here. These are all text boxes.
No, but the empty ones, are they visible? You're saying they are?
Yeah, they are. It doesn't matter if they have a value or not.
So they're all visible.
The ones over here are all invisible. But these ones are all visible.
Okay. I don't get it then, because when you loop, when you leave the focus, it makes it visible, and then it all works.
I'm going to set all the combos to be visible in this loop. There it is there. Okay, Jack. Thank you.
Hey guys, I gotta run. It's Aaron.
Okay.
That's okay. You guys have a good one. Thanks for showing, man. That was really cool.
Goodbye, Aaron.
Take care, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
I'm happy tabber.
It's working now?
It's working. Let me close the form and reopen it. That's the better test, isn't it? Put these little pluses in here to help me see which ones actually had data. Oh, that's not a very good selection. Yeah, it works.
So what was
The
happening
back tab
was...
doesn't work.
No? Seems to.
When I hit Shift Tab, it's taking me to there instead of here. I'll have to look at that.
Well, you got partway there.
Yeah, and this is what I love about the group. You show somebody your problems and you figure them out.
But why did it work?
Not saying I deserve any credit for this.
Did it work because...
because I explained it to you how to step. Go ahead.
No, like it worked because when you tabbed into the original text box, the combo box underneath was invisible, so it had, like, well, I don't get it. Why did it work now?
I think the combo box has to be visible, but just behind the text box.
Interesting. So in your code, if there was data in the text box, you made the combo box visible. But if there wasn't, you didn't?
No. No, it wasn't because it was... There's no combo boxes that we can see with our eyes right now, but they're all visible. They're just behind the text box.
No, yeah, I get that. But how was it before?
Before they were all invisible.
Oh, before they were all invisible.
Before they were all invisible.
Okay.
And then, you know what might have happened? Before, I wasn't declaring whether they were visible or not. So I thought I had marked them all as invisible. Maybe some of them, you know how when you open the form and close it in design mode, you get some things saved. Like you can see up here, there's stuff up here. I didn't intend for that to be up there. That just got in there when I was working on it and saved. So the state of some of those combos might have changed, and I wasn't explicitly setting them. I'm happy.
We're running about 5 minutes over, Ben.
Okay.
I thought this was a very interesting demonstration. Thank you. It was far more extensive and complicated than I envisioned what you might be working on. I can tell a lot of work went into this.
Thanks.